Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Welcome back. It is Wednesday, April 17th, 2024. Uh, have you had enough craziness out there yet this week? It's midweek. I hope you're struggling through with a great big old smile on your face. I want everybody to know tonight is, and we're going to get out of the doom loop tonight, guys. We're going to talk about something that's exciting, encouraging, inspiring, and in the vein of what we do here, news and what's necessary. And so we're gonna do all of that. As you guys know, if you've been here before, make sure that you give this a share, guys. We depend on you now more than ever in this day and age of censorship, and we're going to be touching on a little bit of that in a few minutes here when I bring my guest on. But uh, guys, this is in strange times indeed, and interesting times indeed, in a couple of points that I want to bring up, and I'm going to ask our guest about here in just a minute or two. I'm very lucky in this position that I'm in, that occasionally I get to see something. I get an advanced viewing. I get a chance to watch a movie before it comes out, and that's what we're going to talk about with here a little bit. In a few minutes, we're going to get into that, but I was excited to have this guest on and talk about this tonight for two big reasons. Understanding that politics runs downstream of culture, and culture means the things that we gather about to discuss and about our daily lives. The normal things, what the parameters of our culture. So, what we do outside of here is our culture, and it matters and it influences politics. So this speaks to that. And the other one is anytime there's an official denial, that's almost a confirmation of truth. So anytime the cancel culture gets their dander up and wants to decide to shut something down, that's a here, hold my beer. I need to talk about this and bring this out because there must be a reason they don't want people to know about it. So on that note, welcoming to our family here, Vanessa Dylyn. It's such an honor and a pleasure to have you on here with us tonight, Vanessa. You've done something that's sorely overdue. I got a chance to watch it last night. We're going to take folks through some of the steps of how we get to where we are, getting to chance to have a kitchen table talk here tonight. And I know that kind of spooks you a little bit because that's not usually the role and format you're used to, because you've been around for a really long time in the information and media universe. So for folks that aren't familiar with you, Vanessa, once again, thanks for coming on and sharing with us tonight your vision and what you're doing, and give folks a little bit of a background as to who Vanessa is and how you get to be here and what makes you tick, and we'll start with that.
Oh, wow, that's a tall order. I'm really happy to be here with you, Wayne. And you're absolutely right. This format is completely new to me. I'm not used to this kitchen table roll as it goes type of format. But I am here because I have been working for 2 years on a film called COVID Collateral. Now, I'm a mainstream filmmaker, and most of the I'm an independent filmmaker. I don't work for any broadcaster. I never have. But I have made films that have been sold to CBC, Bell Media, TVO, all of the main broadcasters across Canada, Netflix, some of the European broadcasters like French Arte, and some of the UK broadcasters. But this film was a completely different experience for me because um, as soon as I wanted to do this film, as soon as I put this film out there to the broadcasters across Canada, there was a deafening silence. Shall we say a polite Canadian silence?
Oh, this is such a wonderful way of putting it, because you can't have done and accomplished all of those things and created movies independently for all of those people without having been at it for some time. And I did get a copy of your bio a little bit, and I was scrolling through there, and some of the names of the people that you've worked with, I'm going, what is this lady doing on my show? Like, this is so far out of the realm of the people that I generally cohabitate in my little neck of the media universe. I mean, you've worked with some really big names, really big people for a really long time in the upper crust of the independent filmmaking industry. Okay.
Thank you. But I will tell you, Wayne, my films reach the average citizen. They are aimed at the average citizen. I have always made films, whether it's neuroscience films, whether it's arts programming, whether it's films on terrorism. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I always ask my question. I always ask myself a question: what does the public need to know? What does the public need to know about this issue? If it's something that someone else is doing, or it's just another arts documentary, then I won't do it. I kill myself making a film. I put myself through hell. This one I went through the 9 circles of hell on COVID, on this COVID film, but I put myself through enough pain to make a film that it's got to be worth it. It's got to be reaching an audience, the average citizen. What I always say is my films are aimed at a curious mind between 14 and 90. So I'm on your show because this film belongs on your show.
I was sitting there listening to you, and that's when I tell people what I do. That's exactly how I describe myself. There's all kinds of news out there. There's all kinds of journalists. There's all kinds of podcasts. I look what everybody else is doing, and I'm going, okay, I don't need to do that. Somebody else is. What can I do that matters? That is new or news or necessary, and that's kind of where I've made my home in doing that. So I completely understand. And you took my first question right off the board there. I mean, it was, who were you trying to reach? And that really answers it. The people that are looking for something that they're not going to find everywhere else. And for me, the documentary filmmaking portion of what I see evolving over the last couple of years is so critically important, as I alluded to in my intro about politics being downstream of culture. If we want to change the politics, we have to start with discussions about things like this documentary brings into an open air forum. And there was a couple of things about this, watching this last night, for somebody like myself that's interviewed all of the doctors, the scientists, the virologists, all of those people. There wasn't a lot in there that I found scientifically reaffirming for my to be informed by. But the what you were able to do with putting it together to encompass in a short time frame, really. How do you put 4 years into 120 minutes, a couple hours or less, is incredibly difficult. Have it make sense. Such an amazing job of that Vanessa. These are some of the things that I want to hit on for the people to understand why this movie is important to go and see. I don't do a lot of premiere stuff for movies unless they're, I feel again like it matters, like it's going to have an impact, and your film is going to do that. So the congratulations from my perspective on that. I hope everybody that's out there,
Thank you.
I'm going to bring this up here right now so people can kind of have a look at the website. There is a website set up for your film, COVID Collateral. Take us a little bit through how you came to the name and the tagline on it. Where do we go for truth? Because the whole time I was watching this, I was going, we gave that truth. We told that truth. We're on the right side of history throughout the, this entire film. Was so much affirmation for me to, to see it on the screen and just kind of be able to, thank you.
Okay. So sometimes, as a filmmaker, you think about titles, and I'm not particularly crazy about this title yet it does indicate that the film is about the film is about all of the collateral damage that came
Not
to
about
us.
COVID. It's about
It's not
everything
about
outside of
COVID.
it.
It's about the public policies. It's about the collateral damage of lockdowns. It's about the suppression of science. The main question that the film asks is, what happens in a free society when science is censored? So that is why we have that subtitle. Where do we go for truth? Because we have been told many stories. The average person was walking around in a bit of a cloud, because we rely, when COVID broke, like compliant Canadians, we all rely on our institutions. We rely on our medical officers. We rely on our government. We rely on our doctors. We rely on our educators. We rely on our legal system to tell us, to guide us. Here's a pandemic. What are we supposed to do? So, like compliant good citizens, we listened. We said, okay, 2 weeks, let's all make this sacrifice and let's bear down. But 2 weeks, through some breaks, turned into 2 years through Canada and the US. So people started to question, what is truth. They started to realize that there were some people who were sitting at their laptops, who were being paid. They were being paid all the way through this crisis. The kids were at home. They managed their kids, but they were getting paid, and they were getting paid to work from home. I'm not saying that they didn't suffer, but there was an entire class of people. There was the lower income people that paid a disproportionate price for this lockdown. And those were people who actually had to show up somewhere to get paid. So pre-vaccine, these were the people who drove trucks across Canada and the US. These were people who had to show up at warehouses so that we could get our Amazon packages. These were people who had to prepare food so that we could do our takeouts. These were people who had to stock shelves. So the public slowly started to realize that we were not all sharing this. We were not all sharing this burden. And then we started, and then um, this whole issue of truth. Very early in 2020, I noticed that there were some really real some prominent scientists who started to question the idea of lockdowns, and they started to question this in public. And there was a group of scientists who were suspicious that COVID did not come from an animal source, but it came from a lab, because there were too many scientists that had looked at the genome of COVID-19 and found that, hey, this looks like it's been tampered with in some lab. So it's the question of, were we getting accurate information?
Wow, there's a when you bring that up, I'm flashing back again as I was wandering down memory lane through watching the movie last night, and to that time period, and I had stayed out of the medical debate up until April of 2021. I mean, I'd been a first responder. I'd been trained in, emergency services and all of those things, and I wasn't getting in their grill through the initial. There was things that were, not making sense. I knew masks were absolute nonsense. I'd been a breathing air specialist for a decade. I knew that was bunk. So that was the window of where I was fighting, and within my knowledge realm of knowledge, I was a breathing air expert that I could fight. But when you bring up the doctors that were fighting it, that was where I really stepped into it, because I went looking for the doctors in Ontario that had been challenging the Ford government, the health department, for an open discussion and a dialogue. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I want to know. So it was very anonymous, very, very, you know, succinct, nothing threatening. They just wanted to have a discussion, and so I followed it for a little bit, and there was no response. So that I found curious. So I took me some time, but I tracked those doctors down, and I was like, okay, well, the government doesn't want to debate you. I want to give you a platform to talk about this. And it was so interesting because at the time it was like they drew short straws to going to be who is going to be the one that would go out onto the podcast and talk about what they wanted to talk about, because that was something that was so foreign to them and all of us. So I kind of have a little bit of fond memories for that, because I think that was where we started to see the dam break. And over the next couple of months, every one of those doctors that wanted to take part in that got a chance to bring their arguments to the table and put their testimony out in the public space. So at that point, I knew that there was something that had changed completely, not just for our community and myself, but that was literally a dam breaking. Things changed at such an incredible speed across the country over the next year. We started to see organizations popping up left, right, and center, saying, and it was kind of like every time it was like a new flower coming up, and we're not alone. And there's more and more and more and more. And
Exactly.
so that's seems like a long time coming to see where we're at now with your film. So sorry, I tend to get out the weeds sometimes with some good stuff, because these are the things that ultimately, it was those kinds of groups and people across the country that started back then, that were able to do to get us to where we're at now, where this movie is going to make sense to people, people that weren't necessarily a part of all of those discussions back then.
Exactly. So what we do in the film, in terms, in terms of those doctors, we go right to the core of where some of the major doctors, especially in the U.S., Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Dr. Scott Atlas, Paul Merrick. We have those huge figures in the film who were, in a sense, the big sacrificial lambs, because they were in the eye of the storm here. They were directly facing down Fauci, and they were and they paid for that. Everything's. I think their reputations now have been restored, and they're on endless media right now. But when this was happening, Jay Bhattacharya was taken down by the mainstream media, by the medical institutions, by his own university. Same with Scott Atlas. Paul Merrick lost his medical license.
Mm-hmm.
And these are deeply courageous people, as are doctors in Canada. Uh, so they were my starting point to construct the film around the suppression of science, the fact that there were many highly qualified voices who said, excuse me, we have a pandemic plan. We've had a pandemic plan for years. It's right here. Here's our playbook, the pandemic playbook. Why are we locking down? Well, we all know there was tremendous pressure from the WHO to actually lock down. And we know that that China has a disproportionate influence on the WHO. We know that China locked down. We know that China lied and said, look, we locked down for a month. The virus is gone. Come and see. So,
I, there's a lot to that here, and I want to pull up this comment and address this. The comment's a little bit early because this is something an important point that we talked about just before the show, and I wanted to bring up. Elizabeth, it sounds like the film. That's kind of a misconception, and I want to make this point. And this was the number one takeaway for me when watching this film is that there was a seamless narration of this story between what happened in Canada and what happened in the US. Now it's a matter of fact and point that most everything that happened in Canada as far as for policy came and originated from the same place in the US. So the people that are the victims, the damage that have faced the most damage, there's no nationality that differentiates them. This is about understanding where the policy, how the ideology came to be. Where did these guys get these crazy ideas that this was a good idea in the first place? And to me, I get it kind of close off the at the end of it. Kind of the teaser beezer for me, people need to be aware of this film right now because they're not done with these crazy antics and policies, and they have another one coming down the pipe that they plan on implementing within the next couple of months. And people think that that's conspiracy theory and all of that is not important or has no impact. Well, everything that you'll see in this movie will be quantified exponentially times 1,000. This is why this important film is so important right now into understanding how these lunacidal these individuals come to their strategies, I guess. So
yes, and in terms of what you were saying about the American and Canadian scenes, I wanted this film to be North America centric. So we have Canadian scenes, we have US scenes. Two of our most important Canadian scenes are in Nova Scotia. And one of them is the conference and it was the first international conference for free speech in medicine, which took place in Nova Scotia. And to me, that's one of the highlights of the film because you have international doctors flying into this tiny town in Nova Scotia and talking about the fact that they cannot exercise free speech, they cannot deal with their patients in an honest manner.
that's kind of where the Barrington Declaration came from. Am I not? Am I correct there with that? So I mean, Canada has played a big role in both sides of this as well, not just and that's I to me that's so important because I've been working very hard on getting people to understand, guys, that imaginary line between Canada and the US, the only thing that is a wedge issue to keep us from understanding that we have the same people coming after us for the with the same tools, maybe just at different stages of it, but we need to bring ourselves together as people, as humanity, doing what's right, not what's easy on both sides of the border, and we can't let that keep us from standing side by side with people that are doing things for the right reasons.
Right, exactly, exactly.
So congratulations on being able to, I think, find a beautiful way of not making this about Canada or the US within this film and still bringing to light some faces and names that Canadians up here will recognize. At one point in there, there's significant, and again, guys, if you're watching this movie, understand there's 4 years of chaos, psyops, Twilight Zone. There's nobody's gonna get it all into one movie, but some of the points that you were able to highlight in there with the treatment of what happened to Roman Baber, for example, has happened to many people that took that position. For us here in our community here, we were working with some of the people that Roman was working with in resisting this. There was Rick Nichols was another one who lost his ability to represent the people over representing the people. So these kinds of things, I think it's important for Canadians to realize that you got fair representation in this, and this isn't a Canadian film. It's not a U.S. film. It's a people film. This is the kind of thing to me. Um, you can take your cousin, your aunt, your uncle, your nephew, the person on the fence, the person that doesn't want to talk about COVID but just wants to understand more about what happened outside of it. This is the film for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And there were a number of things that people said in the film that we could not put in the film. So we went as far as we could, but we had to get legal. We had to get whenever you make a film in the Canadian system, you have to get errors and omissions insurance. And the only way you can get that is having a legal firm clear your film.
Wow.
And so we were lawyered up 25 different ways, I'm afraid to say. And so there were people in the film that said things that I just knew. I said, can't put that in there, can't put that in there. So we pushed it as far as we could. And even with this film, lawyers came back with 30 points in the film, and they said, you have to back this up. And some of the things we had to back up were things that experts had said. Now, that really bothers me when a lawyer comes back and says, are you sure that this neuroscience is accurate about this? And I have to go and say, he's the neuroscientist, not me. You know, he has signed a contract saying that as far as he knows, he's telling us what is accurate. But in this film, there were 30 areas where the lawyer said, you have to back this up. So we did a tremendous amount of research. So before we sent the film out to the lawyer to have proof, we already knew, we already had backup. So we saddled them with all sorts of documentation saying, here's the article it comes from, here's the scientific article it comes from, here's, on and on and on, on and on and on. And so I think as of a few days ago, we were cleared.
I just running through that process, I can only imagine. So it's probably why my idea of a documentary film will never actually make the light of day, because I would refuse to cut what was fact from it. I can't imagine what that must have been like for you, having made films in such a way for so long, to all of a sudden having, was it a real drastic change in trying to put this one together?
No, because even if you're making a film for, let's say, National Geographic or Discovery Channel, and you've got experts on, you have to give them a scientific version of the transcript. You have to give them I forget what they call it, an annotated transcript where you have to back everything up, because before it goes on National Geographic, these broadcasters have a certain brand, and the ones that have a brand where, either Nova or Nat Geo, anyone that's doing anything scientific, you have to provide annotation. So you've got to provide scholarly proof. And I remember at one point, I was doing a film with, we were doing a film with Sting, and it was a film about the relationship between the brain and music. And we had put his brain under an fMRI, and while we were playing music to him, we played different types of music to him. And we had a number of experts in the film who said, they they made certain scientific statements. And I remember the executive at Nat Geo came, their scholar in residence type came and said, "Well, how do you know that this is accurate? How do you know that this is accurate?" And finally, I said, "I don't. The expert knows that, not me." And basically, I said, "Leave me alone." I mean, at some point, so it's not. So I expected this kind of scrutiny because this is when you make because I don't make the kind of films where you have this vision and you just slap it on YouTube. It has to go through a vetting process. So you go, if a broadcaster comes on board like CBC or Bell, as you're making the film, you just keep them up to date. They know what you're saying. They've bought into it, but at certain stages, they view that cut, and they say, "You know what? This doesn't make sense. Can you look at this again?" They tend to be very. I mean, with most of my films, they have not interfered very much. And in this, in this COVID film, the actual broadcaster, New Tang Dynasty, I've had pretty well carte blanche,
Wow.
which is really, it's the legal process. So it's the lawyerly stuff, and I expected that on this particular film they were going to go through the whole film with
Well, one of the things that I did notice is you stayed away from you were able to stay away from a lot of the hot button subjects about the debate around it, the this, that, and the other thing, and to put a human uh, human lens on who the good guys were and who the not so good guys were without pulling out the graphs and charts and data and that kind of stuff that would have made it impossible to carry a story and probably also to get licensed getting into all of that. So a very nuanced a project in able to being able to get to that. And just like every movie, guys, documentaries included, there's always a bad guy. And I'm gonna have a little tongue in cheek with this a little bit because I do want people to go in and see it for themselves. But there's so interestingly enough, and I do find that very very surprising that you were able to actually get this to the point of being accepted to be on film. You must have really kind of questioned whether this was the right project to take on before you decided to actually do this, given the environment of the discussion around all of this. So, what was it for you, Vanessa, that said, "Okay, I'm going to do this"?
there were a few things. One was the restrictions on people didn't make sense to me. And I started to question why local businesses were being driven bankrupt, yet the big box stores stayed open. So I started looking at things like that, and I began to wonder, why is it that I'm at risk of getting COVID if I buy a croissant in a bakery, but not if I buy it at Costco? Why is it that I'm going to get COVID in my local hardware store, but not at Best Buy? And so I didn't see people dropping dead while they were shopping, but the kids were being kept out of school. And we knew very early on the data was in, like the Center for Disease Control knew that children were not at risk. Basically, they were at more risk of getting the flu than they were COVID. Meaning, if they got COVID, they were not likely to get very sick. Yet the kids were being kept out of school for a long time. So I started thinking there's something going on here. And then one thing that and I started noticing that these scientists like Dr. Martin Kulldorff and Jay and Scott Atlas uh, were being demonized. There were that why are we demonizing these really highly qualified scientists? What have they got to tell us? Why aren't we getting, why aren't we allowed to listen to this information? These are good guys, you know. And
That was the big red flag for me when I have Dr. Peter McCullough on my show when he should have been wall to wall booked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on every international mainstream program on the planet. No, no, he wasn't on any of those places. He was on my platform. In all of these caliber of experts and doctors, why are they on my platform, a little nobody in Canada, when they are literally the ones leading the true real information, and every time that they would dare to pop their head up and say anything, anybody that had a even had their eyes open would see the abuse that they would get. It was just so to the extreme. These were good men, good doctors. Dr. Bhattacharya, uh, so many of them. It was hard to
exactly.
take.
But I'll tell you one thing, Wayne. The one thing that still haunts me, that I'm really deeply rattled by, and that is what I couldn't get over through this whole process, was that we condemn people to die alone. People, can you imagine? You're a terminal patient, you're an elderly person, and you have to say goodbye to your family through an iPhone or through an iPad. Your family can't be around you. Uh, I, I, I couldn't get my head around that. I thought that was the most cruel and inhumane thing during
People
this
died
whole
over the
period.
protocols. It was just beyond accepted. I have a real hard time with that still, to be honest with you, Vanessa. To me personally, I can't move forward on this whole time in history. There has to be transparency and accountability. Something that I swore to, however long it takes. That's it. It has to happen because they literally traumatized the entire planet, and that's not just a oops. That's not an oops.
No, this is comes this goes to the core of our being. Uh, uh, the fact that you've got your mother there who's dying and you can't comfort her, you can't hold her hand, you can't say a prayer over her. You know, Dr. Chris Milburn from Nova Scotia, who's in our film, he did an interview with us that there was just no room for it in the film, but it was very, very moving. And he said that his mother was in a nursing home, and she was lonely, and she was afraid. She wasn't afraid of dying, she was afraid of being lonely. And he said, as she was dying, he said he sneaked into the hospital. And because of who he was, he said he knew he had privilege. Because of who he was, he sneaked into the hospital and he held her hand as she was dying. And he says that's the most important thing he ever did in his life.
Well, that's it's the fight for humanity,
Yeah.
100%, and it's not over. And that's where this film is important. People, there's people gonna have a lot of questions. Why now? We know all of the evidence. We know that, but we need to know how to tell the story because they're gonna do it again. They have more plans again. People need to understand and see the patterns and watch for them and be aware of them. They're going to do it again. That was the thing that kept coming back to me when I was watching this, given when I watched the news, and I'm following what the WHO is doing with planning their next attempt with their conquest treaty. And these guys, they don't quit. They just try to find another way. They just try to find another way. And that's exactly what they did to so many people throughout this first episode of this earth changing event, because this was. And someday we'll look back in history and say, it's going to be like, when you know Princess Diana died, everybody knows where they were, what they were doing, who they were with. When the towers came down, everybody knows. This is going to be one of those marker points in history. Where were you and what were you doing during the great pandemic of 2021, 2022, 2023? It's a historical event, but it's not over yet, and we need to be on guard, and we need to at least plant seeds in people moving forward. I think that we've got a short window of opportunity for that in the general population before we get to more insanity again. These are just my thoughts. Does that have anything? Does that play into what you were doing with this? Because and then we'll get into some of what you're facing here in bringing it to the public.
That's that's you're hitting the whole purpose of this film, and that is the film has to get out there. We want to do special screenings. We want to be able to screen this film in public with people in the theater, so that we have a panel, and part of the panel is going to deal our panel in Toronto. One of the people in our panel is Bruce Pardy, who's the professor at the law professor at Queen's University, and he has been writing a lot about the WHO and this new pandemic treaty. So we're using these public screenings and these discussions afterwards to look at what's next. How are we going to face how are we going to face a new public crisis, whether it's a health crisis, whether it's possibly war, but any kind of public crisis, we need adults. We don't need toddlers in charge. We need strong leaders. Uh, we need and so um, part of the reason for the panel is for uh, people like Bruce Pardy to actually tell us what he knows about what the WHO is planning, and these public screenings are also a cathartic way of bringing people into an important discussion about what we went through during this period of COVID. So we're trying to hold as many public screenings as possible.
So that was kind of one of the other things that interested me about this, without giving names or anything like that. Yeah, I understand your approach on this very, very clearly. And again, this is in full support. People need to know what they have planned with this WHO pandemic treaty, and they are, in my opinion, a large part of the smoke and mirrors and nonsense and garbage and gobbledygook that they were dealing with is to keep us distracted from getting organized in resisting
Mhm.
exactly this policy. And this movie really shows and highlights how people, experts, Western experts, were captured, manipulated, used, and abused to facilitate the destructive policy. And that, to me, is the pattern that we cannot allow to repeat. That you were able to really assemble there in a story that is coherent throughout it. So to me, that was the urgency that I feel for everybody to see, that is to recognize how did they capture, and what recognize the signs, the symptoms, the language that they used in said capture, because that capture of those Western experts, as it was said in there, is what leads us to these policies that are nightmarish to be gentle, in my opinion. So, uh, thoughts is that, was that what you were trying to get across with that,
Yes,
part of it? There's a
yes,
some
and also at the end of the film we have updates, we have texts that are updates that will give an audience an idea of where are we now. It will refer back to certain points in the film and it will update. For example, we now have at least 20,000 studies about the fallout, about the societal fallout, the economic fallout, again, that collateral damage from COVID policies. And we have a number of texts on screens saying that the lockdown was considered the most disastrous public health policy of our time. And we go on and on. And and we also have a confession from Dr. Francis Collins, who recently retired from the National Institutes of Health, and he says everything. And he says he said during an interview, he said the public health mindset, he said, is narrow and it will do anything to save one life. It doesn't take into account any kind of collateral damage, children being out of school, suicides, mental health. He said, and we all had that mindset. He said, which was unfortunate. It wasn't unfortunate.
It was catastrophic.
It was exactly. It wasn't unfortunate. At least he admitted that the public health policies were too narrow. I mean, never in the past have we, and this is something that Dr. Scott Atlas brings up in his book. He says that when he went to the White House as the special as the special envoy for the coronavirus task force, what he was shocked at was that there were no other types of experts on that task force, like an economic expert, social science, psychiatrist, all of those people that public health policy relies on to come to an accurate risk benefit ratio. What's the risk of locking down versus the benefits of locking down? And he said they didn't have anyone like that. He said he was incredibly shocked.
Well, I think we're still dealing with that today. The repercussions of that, the collateral damage, is still multiplying today because of those policies that unqualified personnel implemented. And I think that this is a very dangerous point in our history when these people think that they have to assume control over emergency situations after having proven that they were the last people on earth that should have been taking over management or control or direction of emergency services, because the only thing that they protected was themselves from us, and at any expense they continue to do so, and double down on their protection of themselves in wash, rinse, repeat. These are bureaucrats. It's all they know. So what's next? Vanessa, here, I know that you've faced some challenges. These social enforcers are starting to make it challenging for people to access the film in theaters where you were initially would have all kinds of support for. And it's not even about ownership support, it's about the cancel culture beast is raising its ugly head in the light of COVID Collateral, the movie. How dare you shed light on their deep dark secrets?
Well, I've faced hostility from my own field. You know, before now, as I was working on the film, outside of the key creative people, I was having trouble just getting your regular business affairs person. I was they were looking up my broadcaster and saying, on Wikipedia, he's called right wing. I mean, you might as well be a child molester. you know. And so they said, oh, I can't in all conscience, being an Aboriginal person and being a gay man, I can't in all conscience be part of this. And I thought, it's just a film. It's just a film about COVID. And so I was
And
having
you
a
in
lot
all
of trouble.
conscience
I
go through
cannot.
life without having a single original thought in your brain. Oh
But
my
you know
goodness.
what? It got down to something so ridiculous that even recently, when we just the technical person that had to do our closed captioning watched the film and said, I don't agree, I'm not doing this. It's been it's been an awful ride, and I've had people that I've pitched this idea to. I sent the film to a close colleague, someone who had worked for me, and he just ignored me. He ignored me. It's just,
Wow.
but the we're having the screening at the Isabel Bader Theatre in Toronto. This is in the University of Toronto, and they had checked me out 99 different ways.
So
And
the screening, if I'm not mistaken, is May 9th coming
it's
up.
May 9th in Toronto. I hope everyone who's listening tonight who lives in Toronto will come. And so it's going on, it's happening. But they themselves, they did their homework, checked me out up and down, and they asked me to have two security guards. And I thought, I whittled them down to one security guard. It's just,
This is not the sound of freedom.
but but you know what? At least they said yes. Whereas in Alberta, conservative Alberta, where I thought, oh, this is no problem, we'll get into a number of theaters. I got this. An email was passed to me, and the email was from the owner of one of the multiplexes in Calgary, and I felt very sorry for her because she had been harassed, and her employees had been harassed for hosting a town hall for the UCP party. Now, I said to myself, yeah, but that's the ruling party in Alberta, and someone is getting into trouble for hosting a town hall to the ruling party. I mean, it would be like Doug Ford renting out Cineplex and activists in Ontario picketing or harassing Cineplex for renting a theater to Doug Ford. I was shaking my head. I couldn't believe it. I said, I don't believe this. I said to myself, banned in Alberta, but the film is available in woke Toronto.
Imagine that, right? There's no rhyme or reason to emotional politics, and that's really where we're at. There's no rhyme or reason in the public square anymore. It's all about who has the most amount of righteous outrage and who has the loudest mob squealing against whatever offense is perceived in the moment. So, unfortunately, in Alberta, that's I'm kind of really not surprised. Edmonton and Calgary are bastions of shall we say, far left ideology. Immediately outside of Calgary is very different. So
I would have never thought that. You see, I always thought of Alberta, and maybe it's because I live in Ontario. I would have never thought that. I always thought, good old conservative Alberta.
well, it's not the Alberta I grew up in, although there are still places where it is, thank goodness, and that's kind of where uh, I think the heartbeat of Alberta actually lives and beats, and insanity is unsustainable. So what's going on in some of those cities is starting to be to come more to the light of day, and I'm hoping that there's a return to some common sense with that. So people are there other locations where it's going to be viewed on or released
We
where can people find the details on all of that, Vanessa, here?
Yes, they can find all the details on covidcollateral.com. The film, I mean, in Toronto, we'll be having our first screening, so we're just planning other screenings in Canada. It's likely we'll have some special screenings in Washington also. We've had there have been a number of representatives from some senators who are very interested in the film. So hopefully it will get some traction south of the border also. But I'd really like to focus on Canada right now and get screenings. So if there are people who are listening this evening that think they can, who are interested in having a special screening themselves for the film, do contact us.
I think it's a great opportunity for people to, we've seen this happen before when they didn't want movies to be seen, where communities and groups gathered together, got a hall, got their community hall, their, whatever the case might be, and arranged for screenings. And I can't think of a better time or movie that's right here, right now, available to us, guys. Get behind this, get on over to covidcollateral.com, find out if there's a screening near you. If there is not, reach out and arrange one. This movie is good enough to take that kind of effort, and I strongly encourage people to get plugged in. This is, again, it's a gentle entry point for people that, they don't want to fight about the COVID. Was it real? Was it not?
No, no,
No,
no.
no,
Yeah, it's not like that.
not
It's not.
that. This
Yeah.
is this is the human factor, and how we have to, with a focus on that, on things to watch for to protect our communities, our families from these kinds of things happening again. So, kind of down here to the last wire here. Last thoughts before I let you go here, Vanessa. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us, and on a personal, unscripted, in the wild, wild west of
Oh,
podcasting.
it's
I
been
hope it wasn't a painful experience.
not at all. It's been fun. It's been fun.
All right. Well, are you going to be out there at some of the screenings, touring this
Yeah.
around the country, or people are going to be able to reach out and connect with you? Guys, in the show notes, wherever you're tuned into this from, you'll find links to social media platforms and other platforms that you guys have set up specifically for this movie. Please, guys, get over there onto the show notes and get plugged in and start following along and helping this get out there.
I'd like to say just one last thing, Wayne, if I may, and this is a very personal note. Um, I have I have taken out loans to finish making this film, and the Toronto screening is a fundraiser. The other screenings across Canada, I'm hoping, will help actually pay for this film. So people who are in Toronto, if you can make it out there, if you can't, send your friends out there. This is a very worthy cause.
That's something that we're familiar with, Vanessa. Is the price of what it costs to deliver the truth, and I'm always proud to be able to support the message to get out there for endeavors that matter, with things that have meat and potatoes, things that are tools or helpful or empowering or inspiring. So I'm so hopeful that people are able to come out and take part and support, and not let this be the end of your work, because I would dearly like to see more. So, guys, help support, help share, help distribute. We are the force multipliers, and this is a good one to go to work on. So awesome! Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you very much.
All right, Vanessa. I look forward to bringing you back when we get sometime down the road. I'm sure you'll have some interesting updates, and
I
we'll
will.
hear from you soon. So,
I
thank you
will.
so much.
Thank you very much, Wayne.
All right. Hey, guys. Vanessa Dylyn, visionary, storyteller, creator, warrior. Uh, it's a wonderful. It really is it is a movie worth watching. I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought, okay, COVID Collateral. It was about the people. It was not about the data, the science, the spreadsheets. COVID Collateral is the name of the movie. It's right there on the screen, Shar. Follow the links. There's links to it in the show notes on all of the platforms, wherever you're tuning in from. You're going to be seeing more of a shift away from the Facebooks and the YouTubes, guys. Working on a show for you guys to explain some things and launch some of our own visionary solutions, answers, and responses to the insanity that the government keeps continuing to endeavor to foster upon us. But this is all for tonight, folks. I love you all. Stay Canadian, stay strong, and go and watch a really great movie the first chance you get, COVID Collateral. All right. Love you all. Bye for now. We will see you Friday for sure. And if you guys didn't catch the dinner and a movie that we did last Saturday, you missed out on the show of the week. All right, guys. Love you all. Bye for now.